Well, the blockchain industry is promised to revolutionize everything from contracts to money. And with me is the Chief Research Officer, Bernhard Scholz of Fantom, also a professor of computer science at the University of Sydney in Australia. And let's just chit-chat a little bit about blockchain. Bernhard, great to have you with us. It's good to see you across the globe. And so tell me a little bit about your background and how you became to be a computer science person and an expert in blockchain.
Thanks, Jane, for having me. Well, it's a fascinating industry, the blockchain industry, and the history of it is also very exciting. I mean, it started after the global financial crisis, and people wanted to have safer ways to store away their money. And so it started with Bitcoin. And the idea of Bitcoin was really that it's a distributed ledger, which is kept consistent by quite complex network protocols. And it's quite safe as well, using mathematical puzzles. And I'm sure everyone has heard about miners, and these miners are basically the custodians of the bank, or keeping the ledger consistent, solving these crypto puzzles, and with that they keep the ledger intact. So this was Bitcoin, and that was very fascinating for computer scientists, because suddenly a lot of very complex computer science problems came from it. So it's all about distributed computing. It's about hard cryptographic problems. But later, so about 2015, a new blockchain came on the block, and this was Ethereum. And with Ethereum, suddenly you could start making money programmable. And with programmable money, we can really now implement sophisticated applications on such a blockchain. I want just to mention a few applications. So a few of these applications would be DeFi, decentralized finances. So all these financial instruments we are used from the daily life in a bank or a stock exchange sort of became replicated on the blockchain. And the major idea there was to really keep the costs down, so to automate these financial instruments and make it available for everyone, so to democratize the financial instruments. And that was one of these big goals of the blockchain industry, and it is still the goal. Yeah. And so moving fast forward, I'm part of the Fantom organization. Quite recently, I took leave from the university, at least for 2 years, and my job is really to set up a research lab to further the technology of Fantom. So the idea is to have new ways of doing things, and we really envision that this whole technology will be used much more widespread than it is used today. So if you think about it, blockchains, when you look at the transactions per second we have, or we can say how many transactions per day are processed, it's really still a very small amount in contrast to, for example, Visa credit cards, where we have hundreds of millions of transactions per day. And one of these intriguing questions is now, how can we scale? How can we do more transactions per day? And there are a lot of problems associated with it. So because transactions are programmable, you need to execute programs, and that's really in some ways slow. And how can you speed that up, this execution of programs on the blockchain? So this is one of these big questions we try to answer. But there are also other questions related to how to store information on the ledger, because a blockchain is, you can think of, it's just a very large ledger. how can you store information efficiently and effectively? And this we haven't really achieved yet. And it's not just related to Fantom, it's just the whole industry itself needs to really improve their technological stacks to become really a daily instrument, not just for nerds and hackers, so that everyone can use it. And with that, we have these scalability issues, which we need to address now.
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation. And you were talking about Ethereum. NFTs really kind of came out of the Ethereum part of this. So now, do you think that that's why we haven't seen blockchain? And I know there's a lot of big companies working on it, but it seems like it's kind of a fringe thing still. Do you think it's because of that latency of transactions, or why has it not been more widely adopted yet?
So I can only speak from the technological viewpoint. I can't really speak from the governance issues. So, I mean, we have seen a lot of governance issues in the past. Especially this year was quite brutal for the whole industry. And of course, the whole sector most likely needs some regulations. I think there are very good players in the market, but there may not be so, I mean, you might not be so good, and they might need more regulations. So there is a whole aspect of regulations which I can't really address today. I'm not an expert in governance and what needs to be done there so that people can be protected to a certain extent. So I can't really address this. And I think that's an important issue, but this is more a sociological issue rather than a technological issue. There are other, means to why it's not adopted. So maybe the question is this a problem which is not needed, blockchains? And so we need to really think hard what kind of killer applications we may be able to run on blockchain. So we need to really think hard, what are good applications for the blockchains which really bring value to societies? And recently there have been quite a bit of hype about NFTs and computer games, but are there other things which really bring new financial instruments to the society, which really help individuals in the society to have a better life? So these are really fundamental questions. Again, I can't really answer all these. I'm really on the computer science side, on the technological side, but there are big questions to be asked in the whole community.
Well, and I think you have to ask the questions first and then kind of figure out the answers. So that's a start, that we know what the big questions are. I mean, one of the applications is smart contracts. And that's, it's kind of boring, but that could really be make things much more efficient. I mean, what do you have to say about the programability of smart contracts?
So, I mean, every new domain which needs a programming language will invent a new programming language. So what I want to say here is that if you go back in history, very early in time, they invented computers, and they were mainly used for scientific calculations. And so they invented the programming language Fortran. We can do a fast forward. I don't want to bore you with the history of programming languages here, but we can do a fast forward. And so, for example, a very prominent language like Java was mainly invented to improve the programmability of the internet, which had huge impact on society. And now we do a fast forward again, and let's talk about blockchains. And so there was a little bit of competition how to program blockchains, and there's still not a clear winner. But one of these most prominent languages in the blockchain space is Solidity, and it's a very simple language. And the idea here is to phrase financial transactions for the ledger, for the distributed ledger, for the blockchain, in a very easy way. And this language Solidity needs to be executed very efficiently on the blockchain. We did recently, and this is why I say performance is such an important aspect at the moment. We did recently studies the last few months how the blockchain programs behave on the blockchain. And what we see here is that classical rules of computer science are overturned. So normally there is this rule called 90-10. And what it means is that 90% of the time, only 10% of the code is executed. Unfortunately, for financial transactions or Solidity programs, that is not the case. So most of the time, only an instruction is only executed once. So we don't have loops. Normal programs have loops, and these programs do not have loops, and they are extremely short. So you can say very high frequently executed programs might have 100, maybe 200 instructions. And that really gives us as computer scientists enormous problems because we are not really used to this kind of programming. Normally, we have built up decades of research to address programs following the 90-10 rule. But for programs like what we see on the blockchain, we have very little research. And so we now try to really find innovative solutions for this. We want to really find ways how we can make the execution of these smart contracts more efficient. And this takes time, of course, but we are very bold. We want to invent a new virtual machine. I did not explain yet what a virtual machine is, but basically these Solidity programs you program are not directly executed in their source code. So you can say programs are really like text documents. Like text documents, programmers phrase the program in this programming language. But then there's something called a compiler, and the compiler translates these text documents into something called bytecode. And this bytecode is then really executed on the blockchain via the virtual machine. So this virtual machine is the execution engine for applications on the blockchain. And this execution engine is really there to perform all these transactions safe and consistently. And the question now is how can we improve its speed? And this is one of our questions, and we want to further the industry by introducing a new virtual machine which makes transactions faster.
Okay. I mean, that might be the game changer, the holy grail, so to speak, to kind of move blockchain along. Now, just in our remaining minute or two, what would you say, being a professor, to young people or even older people who want to learn about blockchain, what kind of languages should they learn? You talked about Solidity. I've heard Rust too. I don't know. Maybe this industry moves so fast. Maybe Rust is old-fashioned now. But what would you say to people to study and to kind of pay attention to really grasp where this industry is right now and where it's going?
So first of all, I want to say there's so much available information. When I started with my first computer in 1982, I think I reveal my age now, then it was 10 years old, and I had my Commodore 64 home computer these days. And it was very hard to get access to information. Nowadays, it's really easy getting access to information. There are numerous blogs just describing how to program financial applications in Solidity, for example. But if people are interested in the engine itself, then everything is open source, and that's really a game changer. So instead of keeping things closed source like what Microsoft did in the past, where they kept or still keep the operating system under wraps, now this whole technology stack is open source. So if someone is really interested contributing towards the technology stack, which I have to say is very hard. You need quite often higher degrees in computer science to really fully grasp what is going on. So if you really want to contribute in the internal of a blockchain, you really need a formal education. However, on the application side, if you just want to write a smaller financial application, you can compare it how to write an iPhone app or Android app. I think there is quite a bit out there, and you may not need all these stringent requirements on your education to really contribute. So that's sort of, you need to really differentiate where you want to contribute, either on the application side or on the system side. Unfortunately, the system side really requires quite a bit of understanding of the underlying theory and the practicalities as well.
Okay, very interesting. And YouTube has MIT courses. And I mean, there is a way certainly to at least get a baseline education about blockchain online for free. And then you can, kind of decide if you want to learn more from there. But, well, Professor, thank you so much. It's very interesting to hear about this and to hear your thoughts about blockchain and what you're doing with Fantom.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.